It was about this time, 24 years ago, 1995, summer, that Jana and I were busy making the rounds at our old church, telling them one after the other that we were moving to a place called Catonsville, that I would be serving a congregation called Christian Temple. It was hard to make those visits that summer memorable. Another thing I remember from that summer of 1995, was that it was the summer that Cal Ripken was on his way to breaking the record of consecutive games played. That was fun news to follow, knowing that we were on our way to the place where it was about to happen. And still another thing that began during the summer of 1995 was that a puzzle began appearing on the back page of the funny papers. It was kind of a puzzle, kind of an image. Maybe some of you all remember it. Summer 1995. It was called The Magic Eye. And that first year we were here in Catonsville, everyone was skipping over the front page, it seemed like, skipping over their favorite comics even, to get to the back page, where they could look at the magic eye. Now, some of you may not remember this puzzle, or have forgotten it, or maybe never heard of it. It worked like this. There would be an image, kind of like a 3D image, big image, with lots of color and lots of detail, and very busy and very rich on the back page of the funnies. The images would be very compelling and beautiful. And what you were supposed to do was to look at that image just right, maybe relax your eyes a little, maybe stare in a certain way, and before long, another image would emerge from all of that color out of the depths of the picture and come into focus as a totally different image, maybe a unicorn, or a sunflower, or a flag, perhaps. That summer in coffee shops around the country and maybe even around the world, you would see people staring at the back page of the newspaper as if they were about to fall asleep, and then they would erupt. I see it! I see it! Now I see it! Oh, I see it! I don't know if any of you all remember any of this. Anyway, I guess it was memorable because it was new to me. And every time someone would shout triumphantly, "Oh, there it is, I see it," I would be so sad and so angry and so jealous, because for some reason, I was never, ever able to see that image. Not one image in the magic eye was I ever able to see. My eyes just wouldn't allow it to come to pass. Now, I'm sure that I said I saw it a couple of times, forgetting that I was an adult and no longer in middle school. Oh yeah, there it is. But I'm here to confess to you, this congregation today, I was never once able to see the hidden image in those magic eye puzzles. All of that color, all of that detail somehow obscured what was laying beneath the surface for so many others to see. And this morning I recall those magic eye puzzles in which the surface picture tended to obscure the picture that was hidden below. I mentioned it to you this morning because I think that the same thing is true, if you will, in the parable of the Good Samaritan. The one picture obscures the other one. Now, all of us know the story of the Good Samaritan, right? We were following along as Tammy read the story, and we know the story of the Good Samaritan. The story of the Good Samaritan is one of the stories that we've exported into the culture at large, right? Far beyond the world of the church. We have Good Samaritan hospitals that treat people when they are sick. We have Good Samaritan laws that protect people when they offer assistance. We have a major international evangelical Christian organization called Samaritan's Purse, which exists to provide assistance to people globally who are victims of war or disease or famine or disaster. There is even something called the GSDR, the Good Samaritan Donkey Reserve. It's in the outback in Australia. We know the Good Samaritan story. We know its color, its texture, its design, its compelling image. But the thing is, I wonder if we know this story almost too well. We're so taken by its images that it's become, in a way, difficult to see what might be considered a hidden image beneath all of that which is so familiar. Yes, the story of the Good Samaritan is a story about aiding the stranger, but the evidence suggests that when Jesus first told this story, a Jewish rabbi telling a story to a Jewish congregation audience, it was much more than a story about aiding the stranger. I guess I have it on pretty good authority that Jesus' original intent in telling this story we know so well has been somewhat obscured and continues to be obscured a little whenever we stop by the side of the road and call ourselves a Good Samaritan or see someone else doing the same. It's the Samaritan part that lies beneath the surface, a little harder to see. Now, one thing I learned along the way when it comes to studying the New Testament, and especially the Gospels, is that one of the best ways to get a real clear picture of who Jesus was, sometimes we just go, I wonder what it was like to know Jesus, who he was. One of the best ways is to look at the parables, the stories that he told and that are preserved in the Gospels. It's just like one of the best ways for me to remember my mom and dad, who've been gone now for many, many years, is to imagine them telling a story, right? My dad just loved to tell the story about the time when he went out to the grocery store with his big brother, bought a full-sized watermelon, took it back to his house where his 12-year-old baby brother had just planted a watermelon patch, and put that big old watermelon on top of his brother's scraggly little watermelon plant. He just cracked himself up every time he told it. I could just hear it. Couldn't get to the end. It was so funny. We all knew how the story was going to end. It's great to recall the stories as a way to remember. Just remembering that story calls to mind the essence of my dad. Same with my mom. Same with the people you love and remember, right? And the same way with Jesus. Remember him, tell him that story. Those stories, those parables, got to the heart of who Jesus was, sprinkled through the New Testament like little bits of coral on the ocean's floor. And from these stories, we can learn that there was one thing that got Jesus more angry or more put out than just about anything else. The parables kind of always came back to this one theme. You know how we all have pet peeves? Jesus had a pet peeve. And the thing he seemed to really not like was self-righteousness. That was just, he really got to it. Now, hate is a strong word, but from just about everything we know, Jesus hated self-righteousness. He hated it when he heard from anyone, I know I am right. There's the story of the rich young ruler who wanted to know what to do to get in the kingdom of heaven. When he heard, he said, oh no, that's not it. The older brother and the prodigal son, self-righteousness. The people who came to work in the vineyard, they were so angry that the ones who just got there got paid the same amount as they did. Jesus hated self-righteousness. He hated it when his disciples acted that way. Remember what he said to Peter when Peter figured out he knew how Jesus' life was going to end? Get thee behind me, Satan. He hated when rabbis were self-righteous. Remember, who is it that is without sin? You go ahead and cast the first stone. Jesus was not a big fan of, I am right. He much preferred the phrase, I am needed. What can I do? And the parable of the Good Samaritan and how it would have fallen on the ears of its first audience is a great example. Man goes down from Jerusalem to Jericho, a very dangerous road, a very steep descent, lots of switchbacks. It would have not been unusual, it would have not taken anyone by surprise for this story to have included someone being attacked. The bad guys just love to hang out in remote and dangerous places. The attack is not the surprise. After the attack, the priest comes by. Priest, someone who knows the law, someone who's steeped in the law, should have known better, passes on the other side. Then a Levite comes by. Again, someone who should have known better, someone who should have acted, passes by the other side. At the heart of Jewish law is to aid the stranger. Nope. But here's where things get interesting. Most of the people who are listening to this story and wondering where the story was going to go, they were listening to Jesus tell the story, were anticipating the way it would go. And they were anticipating that after the priest and the Levite, that Jesus was going to use the rule of three. You know how we use the rule of three when we tell stories. A rabbi, a priest, and a minister walk into a bar. Jesus, Moses, and God go out to play a round of golf. There aren't two little pigs, right? And Goldilocks does not come upon a house where 4 bears live. The people who are listening to this story would have been totally expecting the rule of 3 to apply here. A priest came by, passed him on the other side. Levite came by, passed him on the other side. The way this should have ended was that then an Israelite came by, just someone like you and me, came by and did the right thing. Just a common, ordinary person, no credentials, came by, saw the man, had compassion. Priest, Levite, Israelite. That's the way the story is supposed to go. But Jesus isn't having any of that. Instead, he tells his Jewish audience that a Samaritan comes by, saw the old man, and had compassion. This is where the room where the story happened gets very, very quiet. Because the Samaritans were the enemies of the Jews. Amy Jill Levine, who is a New Testament scholar in Tennessee, probably uses a little overstatement when she says that this would have been like Jesus saying, "Along comes Larry, Curly, and Kim Jong-un. Along comes Flopsy, Mopsy, and a hunter on the first day of rabbit season." The Samaritans weren't just ordinary Joes. Samaritans were hated. They were the other. They were them. If our current president would have been the one beaten up, laying on the side of the road, when he was finally able to open his eyes, Jesus' story would have had him staring into the eyes of soccer star Megan Rapinoe. And she wouldn't have even needed an animal. She could have just lifted him over her shoulder and taken him. Or maybe he would have awakened to see that he was surrounded by a whole caravan of refugees who were making their way through Mexico. One cradling him in her lap, another giving him a cool drink of water. If it had been a Palestinian boy, half dead but still with the rocks in his hand on the side of the road, the one who would have had compassion would have been the fully armed Jewish soldier. The story of the Good Samaritan is about benevolence, but it is about war. As far as I can tell, this story isn't only about doing the right thing when we're out on the road and offering assistance. It's about seeing the one we traditionally view as enemy and imagining what it would be like to be half dead on the side of the road and to be recipients of their compassion. If we want to move the needle toward the kingdom of God as followers of Jesus, Jesus seems to be saying we need to seek out those we so easily and often see as the other and figure out how to act toward them with mercy and compassion. I think I think that's the image below the image. I finally found one. In the kingdom of God, the enemy is also our neighbor. And so, people of God, try it out. Let's peer down below the story for just a minute. In the terrible and unlikely event that any of us were ever attacked and left by the side of the road, who is it that we would least like to see bending over us, offering us a cool cup of water? Or turn it around. Who is it that we would be most reticent to approach, laying over there in the ditch, half dead? Jesus says, go and do likewise.